Hi, welcome back to my series about the midlife transits. This is the third video of the series about the infamous Uranus opposition. If you haven't watched my other two videos about the Pluto square or the Neptune square, you can find those via my channel. Before I begin, I want to invite you to sign up to a free newsletter that I'll be starting shortly. I will be taking questions from my audience and answering those questions using the chart of the moment. It's free to sign up. I will present the link below on my website. It's very easy to see the subscribe option at the top. So I hope you sign up. Hope you like and subscribe to this series. Hopefully I'll be doing more series after this one. So let's talk about the Uranus opposition. And like the other two videos, I wanted to start with the astronomy first because I think it adds a lot of color to how astrologers interpret these planets as they show up in our charts, archetypes of these planets, how they play out in our lives, and such. So we'll start with the planet Uranus, and then we'll move on to the mythology. So Uranus is a very cold and windy world. The ice giant is surrounded by 13 faint rings and 28 small moons. It rotates at nearly a 90-degree angle from the plane of its orbit. This unique tilt makes Uranus appear to spin sideways, orbiting the sun like a rolling ball. It was the first planet found with the aid of a telescope in 1781. Uranus's environment is not conducive to life as we know it. The temperatures, pressures, and materials that characterize this planet are most likely too extreme and volatile for organisms to adapt to. It's the only planet whose equator is nearly at a right angle to its orbit. This may be the result of a collision with an Earth-sized object long ago. This unique tilt causes Uranus to have the most extreme seasons in the solar system. For nearly a quarter of each Uranian year, the sun shines directly over each pole, plunging the other half of the planet into a 21-year-long dark winter. Uranus is also one of just two planets that rotate in the opposite direction than most of the planets. Venus is surprising to me as to the other planet. I find this very interesting, all of this description, because Uranus is, you experience Uranus squares every 21 years because in your mid-40s, you experience the opposition. It's got an 84-year orbit. And the descriptions of this planet and how it spins on its axis at such an extreme angle, and then the seasons, to me, really do describe the experience of Uranus in our life and how it can it can really spin you out, you know, to birth something new in your life. But I'm not finished. Uranus is one of the two ice giants in the outer solar system. The other is Neptune. Most, 80% or more of the planet's mass is made up of hot, dense, fluid, icy materials, water, methane, and ammonia, above a small rocky core. Near the core, it heats up to 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It is not for the weak. Magnetosphere. So this is a hard a word for me to pronounce, but it has an unusual, irregularly shaped magnetosphere. Magnetic fields are typically in alignment with the planet's rotation. Both Uranus's magnetic field is tipped over. The magnetic axis is tilted nearly 60 degrees from the planet's axis of rotation and is also offset from the center of the planet by 1/3 of the planet's radius. Uranus has auroras, but they are not in line with the poles like they are on Earth, Jupiter, and Saturn. This is due to the planet's lopsided magnetic field. The magnetosphere tail behind Uranus opposite the sun extends into space for millions of miles. Its magnetic field lines are twisted by Uranus's sideways rotation into a long corkscrew shape. Now, this last little bit is very interesting too, because it's Uranus that really brings out something new in our lives. Saturn is where we create structure, and Uranus is where we yearn for something new and something outside of the traditional, societal structures and our structures. And during your midlife, you are spun out pretty aggressively if you haven't been living according to your own purpose and something that is authentic to how you were meant to show up in the world. You can experience a lot of this spinning out, and really what's happening is there's this separation that happens in your midlife, and you separate so that you can come back together, in a new authentic way. And sometimes you go and have a dark night of the soul, they call it, and go on a spiritual quest. And what they say about spiritual growth is that it's a spiral and it's not linear. And just like this description of the magnetic field lines being in a corkscrew shape, that's sort of like a spiral. You go one step back and or one step forward and two steps back, as the saying goes. But if you keep on your path, you eventually get there in this spiral-like movement. So I thought that was really interesting. So we'll continue this exploration with the mythology. So I have taken a lot of quotes from Barbara Hand Clow's book, Astrology and the Rising of Kundalini. I read her book on Chiron, and it was such an amazing book. And I was looking for other authors who had written about Uranus. And I found that she had written a book, and the term Kundalini really called to me. So I got that book. And then I also have a book by my favorite evolutionary astrology, Jeffrey Wolf Green. He had a book on Uranus, which was really a recording of some of his seminars. So I'm for the mythology, I'm using Barbara Hand Clow's book to talk about it from her perspective. She has a really great way of describing and really digging into the mythology. So I'm going to quote her now. But if you want to read some books, this is a great book. She's just an amazing writer, and her perspective on the midlife transits were instrumental to me moving through them myself and understanding them myself. So Uranus, the usurper of power from the primordial triple goddess of the three phases of the moon. This myth signals the time of separation from the feminine, a time when the ancient world of primal waters and chaos of the goddess gave way to the first emergence of ego. This was when we first became self-reflective and separated from our source. Uranus is son of Earth. Robert Graves notes in the Greek myths, at the beginning of all things, Mother Earth emerged from chaos and bore her son Uranus as she slept. Uranus was also the Earth's lover, her co-creator, and he greened the Earth, created rain, life forms, lakes, and the sea. This co-creation by Uranus is a marriage to Earth, a primordial hieros gamos, or ritualistic sexual union with the goddess from whom all creation is derived. It is the source of sexuality, of eros, of all life. The most significant myths are always multi-layered. And during a last attempt to merge with the mother goddess, Uranus created the Cyclops, primordial monster human creatures, only to banish them to the center of the earth. Then Mother Earth persuaded her other sons, the seven Titans, led by the head Titan Saturn, to castrate their father, her lover. Finally, Uranus became sky god. He's separated from the earth, and in that cleavage lies a wound that we are only beginning to heal. This is not a happy family picture. There isn't much harmony between the sexes here. Although Father Uranus made much beauty with Mother Earth, there was also much violence and battle. And this has been the archetypal underpinning of civilization's perception of the relationship between the matriarchy and the patriarchy, that the former is subjected to the power of the latter. Uranus first made water and life forms on the Earth's surface and fathered the Titans. But once his creation powers were terminated by castration, he went to the sky. This patriarchal nightmare envisions a looming wound, male creator in the sky, the castrated father, while Earth dies in punishment without his greening powers, symbolizing a profound separation from our eroticism. Now, that's a powerful description of Uranus. And I have to say that I just recorded with my partner an episode, a heretical episode about our recent fixation around gender and what gender means, and the polarization around gender. And interestingly, in that presentation, I was looking at both the USA's chart and Russia's chart, because they both have strong Cancer and Cancer and Capricorn signatures, which is all about Cancer is ruled by the moon, and Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. So it really is symbolic of the matriarchy versus the patriarchy. And right now, the US is going through its Pluto return. And it's no wonder that we are looking at this in our culture and through the lens of climate change. And it was interesting because when I looked at Russia's chart, they experienced their Pluto opposition and conjunct their sun, because their sun is opposite of Pluto in Cancer. And in 2000, I think it was around 2011 to 2013, they went through a lot of suppression of women and homosexuality and all sorts of things. They're still quite repressive of these and still fighting that fight, but especially during the Pluto opposition. And interestingly enough, the United States will be experiencing its Uranus return in Gemini in the next few years. I don't know exactly when that's going to be, but I just was reminded of this as I've been exploring Uranus, and it's just a powerful archetype. And when you see it, especially when you see it from a country's perspective, and the country that you live in really conditions who you are, it's as above, so below. In the macro, so is the micro. So in our lives, we go through these times when we experience things that we see in the world, and the United States specifically as a country is going through quite some changes, and it's just interesting to go through them with a wider perspective. When you kind of zoom out and you see it from a wider perspective, it to me brings a lot of clarity to my own personal experience and what I've been going through. Okay, so let's talk about the Uranus opposition specifically. I want to quickly go to Jeffrey Wolf Green when he talks about Uranus. Uranus correlates to individuation, liberation, freedom, and deconditioning. Deconditioning from what? Deconditioning from Saturn. Saturn correlates to all the conditioning patterns of our life, the conditioning patterns of society, family expectations of people in our lives, and the conditioning patterns relative to all the prior lives that you bring into this life. All that conditions your sense of identity at any moment in time. Uranus clearly is an antithetical archetype to Saturn. This means that Uranus is forever trying to shatter, revolutionize, liberate, or break free from all those conditioning patterns. What for? What is the intent? To what purpose? If we shatter all the conditioning patterns that define our sense of personality and identity, then we can at some point arrive at our essential nature, an identity that is unconditioned. Obviously, this can be a fairly long journey. When we go through a Uranian transit, an opportunity exists relative to the house or planets that are being transited to break free from the conditions that have defined how those functions have manifested thus far in our life. The Uranus transit always provides for this opportunity. In the natal chart, the planets that Uranus is aspecting at birth and the house that it is in provides for this very same opportunity for the entire lifespan. Most of us, however, most meaning 70% or 75% of the people in any culture, resist this Uranian deconditioning impulse. One has to keep in mind here that Saturn, we always have to relate Saturn when speaking of Uranus, correlates to the parameters of what you call your consciousness, what you're actually aware of at any moment in time. This Saturn boundary provides structural definitions of what you are at any moment in time. From a deeper point of view, your individual sense of social consciousness is greatly determined by the norms, values, and beliefs, customs, rules, and the laws of the culture that you are born into. Your entire sense of social security is based on taking in these societal conditioning imprints. Thus, the Uranian impulse is resisted by many because to respond to it would simultaneously create individual and social insecurity. The Uranus opposition accelerates the psychology and physiology of aging. Saturn is a co-ruler of the pituitary gland. This gland regulates the functions of the entire organism, including the progressive degeneration of aging of the system. At this juncture, we become sharply aware that we are in midlife, that our youth is receding, that we have an increasingly limited amount of time to live, and that our mortality is perceived in sharp relief. In females, the aging process normally signals the beginning of menopause, and in males, the waning of our sexual energy or interest. These developments certainly can induce a midlife crisis in many. Even though this midlife crisis manifests in most people for the above reasons, most suppress it and carry on with their lives in a kind of stoic resignation of their lot or fate in life. Saturn. To radically alter Uranus life at this point in time, given the obligations, commitments, and duties that are in place for most of this point at this point in our lives, is just too much too seriously. Saturn act upon Uranus and Saturn. This awareness will promote desires to experiment with new ideas, experiences, and people that symbolize realities outside of the status quo. The burst of experimentation will progressively give way to settling upon ideas, philosophies, values, and a general lifestyle that symbolizes and reflects who the person actually is or is becoming. The deconditioned self. For the 30% or so who have already attempted to define Saturn themselves outside of the status quo, this juncture will still produce the need to detach from the immediacy of one's life. Restlessness and the temptation to withdraw from the conditions of one's life can manifest in most of this group. These psychological symptoms reflecting the awareness of mortality. The awareness of mortality reflects the restrictions, constrictions of time. This awareness thus induces the temptation to withdraw from the immediacy of the conditions of one's life in order to reflect upon it, to detach from it, to objectify it. That was my own addition. Uranus is about objectification. The need to detach produces the restlessness. The need to reflect upon one's life is linked with the need to adjust, change, or radically alter any condition which restricts Saturn, the future, Uranus. So again, I want to go back to Barbara Hand Clow when she talks about the Uranus opposition and the Kundalini. Kundalini is the Earth's natural life energy, which flows through each of us more intensely at the moment of Uranus opposition. However, our evolution into self-reflection has resulted in profound blocks in our energy conduits, the chakras, spine, and meridians. Living beings are meant to be connectors through which energy is transmuted due to the electromagnetic flow of waves traveling at the speed of light from the sun. We are destined to be co-creators, existing in the magnetic gravitational field of Earth as Uranus greens the life forms with electrical sparking. The way to facilitate our evolution now is to gently allow Kundalini to rise naturally at midlife, realizing that the electrical force of Uranus maximizes our connectivity at the Uranus opposition. The crisis at this time signals our need to fuse earth and sky right in our own bodies. A fully resolved Uranus opposition balances sexual polarization as males integrate their inner female and women their inner male. True connection is the result of the union of positive and negative electrical energies, and the feminine principle receives or is negative, while the male principle projects or is positive. This is why the issue at midlife for men is to open the heart and find the anima. For women, it is to open the throat chakra to activate the animus. We need to heal the looming wounded Uranus by integrating male and female within. We all need Uranus as lover and not as father. Our failure to recognize and live up to our full potential as essentially spiritual beings is creating increasing distress and frustration in society, especially among the young. There are too many physiological theories which amputate human nature at all its growing points, too many social attitudes in high places which maximize weakness and fail to set sufficiently challenging goals for the spiritually adventurous and the idealistic to aim at. By putting too material a value on ourselves and imposing unjustifiable constraints on nature, we unconsciously take power from the true elite and place it in the hands of those whose reach most grievously fails to exceed its grasp. What happens astronomically for about 90% of us at midlife, a crisis unfolds in three parts. It is a one step forward, two step back, three steps forward process. It's like a car going over a point, backing up and going over it again, and then pulling forward for the last time, thus crossing the same point three times. In the first phase, Uranus passes across the point that is exactly opposite its place in the birth chart. At this first opposition approaches, we begin to feel acutely disturbed. Physiologically, Kundalini energy has awakened and moved out of the root chakra, has rushed up through the body and has gotten stuck in whatever chakra is blocking our spiritual evolution. Our job during the Uranus opposition is to clear that blockage by whatever means works for us. That includes traditional therapy, journal writing, past life regression, and body work are some currently useful methods. This book is amazing. It goes through all the chakras. So I encourage you to get it or to get Jeffrey Wolf Green's book. All of his books are amazing. His book is called Uranus. And it's quite apt in what they describe here as I'm reviewing it. Now that I'm going through my Chiron return, it takes a few years to really understand it at a deep level, what you've been going through. But I recognize all of this, and that's why I'm reading it now. So let's go through my own experience of my Uranus opposition. And I just wanted to point out that you can't talk about Uranus without Saturn. And Saturn opposition happens very near the Uranus opposition. For me, it was the very next year. And, Uranus is here to shake things up. And then Saturn is, whoa, but you still have responsibilities here. And you kind of have a choice. You have a forced choice, but, you adapt to it, and you either stick to your guns, or you kind of revert back into your old life stoically, as they say. It's not easy. I had a very tumultuous experience myself because I was not living according to my own authority. And it took me a very long time to really understand what was going on with me. Like I said in my introduction, when I was growing up, we talked about the midlife crisis from the male perspective. And we didn't really talk about it from the female perspective. And we both go through these midlife changes in a very, in a similar but different way, Yesterday, I actually started to record this because I'm just much better with the script and practice. And I just decided to do it. And at the time that I was explaining this, I was remembering my father's death, which happened right before this. And like I said, you can't talk about Uranus without talking about Saturn. And Saturn can be representative of our father, but also our family karma. And it's interesting because my father was very Uranian and shows up in Uranian ways in my chart. His actual Saturn and Uranus sit near my south node. My south node is between his Saturn and Uranus. So it really was, me coming in and really playing out in this specific experience. In my experience, I was really playing out physically what I had gone through as a child and experienced with my parents as role models. Right near this time, like I said, I found out my dad was sick in November of 2017. And by March 2018, he had died from lung cancer. And I watched him die. I was there with him when he took his last breath. And at this point in the video, I cried yesterday pretty intensely. I had to stop. There's nothing like being with someone you love on their deathbed and watching them take their last breath. I still miss him. So my Uranus opposition happened. My first hit was in July of 2018. And when I found out that my dad was dying, I went to his bedside. He was in Arkansas at the time at the VA. Thank God for the VA. He was in the Army. I'm really thankful for that VA because they treated him very well. And he got a couple of days to be with us in good spirits. But during that time, I had been trying to get out of New York City for a good 5 years. I was living with my partner and my son in a very small apartment. And I was going through changes that I felt trapped, like many of us do in our own making, in our own making since our Saturn return. You wake up and you're like, why am I in this world of my own making? And now I'm trapped and I need to get out. That was the experience that I was feeling. I had during my, if you listen to my previous videos, you know, I had some power struggles at work. And during my Neptune square, I'd gotten fired. And, you know, at that time, I was pretty wiped out and done with that kind of work, but I wasn't done yet. I got another job pretty quickly after that. And it was in the job was located, well, their headquarters were located in Australia, and they were opening up a satellite office. And I was meant to lead marketing and build a marketing team, which I did. I did do. And I only took that job because I was able to walk to work, and they had a WeWork that I started, and I built the team. But it was clear in that experience that I had made a mistake, and I really wasn't doing what I came here to do, what I was loving to do. And I was still drinking a lot, and I was miserable. But, you know, I got to travel to Australia. That was a big selling point. And during my travel to Australia, that's when Trump won the presidency. And I sort of went into shock a little bit about that. I was out of the country, and during that time, there was some Australian people that were, I guess they were from the outer cities. I was in Melbourne, but they were from the local towns, and they were also going through very similar changes that we were going through. So they were making a lot of comments and kind of celebrating the Trump win. And that I was outside of a bar. I had gotten some cigarettes. I was drinking, and it was just it was such an intense time. And my husband met me when I came back in California. I remember we went across from LA to San Francisco. It was a beautiful ride, but you know, I was kind of dazed and confused, I think, at that time. And then soon after, you know, they fired the CEO from that company, and then they let me go, which was a blessing, except that I had to let my whole team that I had just hired, I had to let them go. And I had really tried to warn them through some of my impatience with them that this was happening. And I, you know, I was trying to build things again, and trying intensely to try to make something happen, which is, you know, really a slow build. And if I had to do it all over again, I would have done it differently. But there was specifically somebody that I had hired that I really loved. She was a great writer. A few minorities on my team that I had hired. And I felt such regret because they had left a job, even though they needed to leave the job. And I was the impetus for that. You know, they weren't being treated well at their jobs. And I was the impetus for that change. And I'm sure they went on to something even greater, but it really ripped me up a lot. And so I had started my own business because I just couldn't go back full time. I found out my dad was dying, and I wanted to be closer to him. And I was able, thankfully, to convince my partner, who is able to go remote, to move to Austin, Texas. And so that's what we did. That was what I did for my Uranus opposition. And you will hear this from people that this is the kind of thing that you do during your Uranus opposition. You can make drastic changes like moving across the country. But I didn't realize at the time that I was doing something similar to what my parents had done to me. My child was 7 when we moved to Austin. And I was 7 when my family first moved across the country to Georgia, where my dad was born. And we lived there for a year, and then we moved to Oklahoma because my mom wanted to go back to school to be a doctor, and she went to Oral Roberts University. she had dreams of saving the world, even though she couldn't save her family. So it was very rocky, those changes for me. And to be honest, I didn't realize this till much later. And we actually had to move again, just similar to my parents. So you play out these things in your, you see these patterns and things that you're trying to heal from your childhood, to be honest. And you create new patterns for your own children to heal from. So it's been sobering to learn all of this, quite sobering, but quite powerful. But that's kind of the reason why I've really gotten so into astrology, because you just see these timings of these events of just right on. And astrology is really about cycles. You're born into a cycle and you play out cycles, and then it's just about time and cycles. So you could probably, look at this from many different perspectives. But I wanted to talk about this from Uranus, and I pointed out, Uranus is in my first house. It's very strong in my first house. It's part of me. It's part of who I am, and it's in Scorpio. So, and that's ruled by Mars. My Mars in the third house, opposite Saturn. So it kind of activates that. But Uranus and Scorpio, in the first house is, you are going to go through a lot of rebirths, let's just say. And I've gone through a lot of rebirths and a lot of chaos that happened in my beginning years. As I learned from my mentor, one of my astrology mentors, Ann Ortley, is that your Chiron is a bridge, and we'll go over the Chiron return in a couple of videos. I'll go through that. But Chiron is your bridge. And depending on where Uranus sits in your house and where Saturn sits in your house, you're either going from chaos, Uranus, to order, Saturn. And I'm going from chaos to order. And this was part of, that coming to see the chaotic force of Uranus in my life, honestly. Gone through a lot of chaos and changes during this time between my Uranus opposition and my Chiron return. So, here is Uranus in a Taurus in my seventh house. So it's about me and the other in my life. And Chiron sits right on the cusp of my seventh house. So it's been quite painful, but I wanted to point out specifically some of the hexagrams in these, where Uranus sits, because it's interesting. So my natal Uranus is in the hexagram 39 in the line 3. And the hexagram 39 is about provocation, but the line 3 is about responsibility. The responsibility in the third line is this early recognition of the responsibility of being a mutative force. That responsibility is not simply for the individual. Sometimes the provocation has to be for the benefit of the others. These are the people in any kind of group situations that do the provoking for others. They themselves might well prefer not to get involved because trial and error means mistakes and punishment. But because nobody else can, they do, because it is built into them. And I would say that is very true in my experience. I've always been the one to speak out loud what people are thinking. I've actually gotten that comment quite a few times in my life, thanking me for bringing up what's in the room already. But that also brings in a lot of trouble. And I've had to learn how to contain that part of me, because some people are not ready to be confronted with that. But oftentimes it's not something that I'm conscious of. I feel a lot in my environment. And because of that, I speak it because I can't live with it when it's underneath, it's very, very challenging for me to not speak what's in the room. And then transiting Uranus was in line, it was in hexagram 38, and also, of course, in line 3. And hexagram 38 is the fighter. And line 3 is about alliance. So we're struggling against a common enemy together. And I would just say that I was able to galvanize my partner to move. And I think that shows up here, but I was also struggling. I was struggling with our partnership at the time. I was struggling with, all partnerships, and how I was going to work with these people, how I was going to collaborate and still be myself. And that's continuing to be a challenge for me. We have a lot of control of what we bring to the table, but we don't have control over others, and we have to learn how to adapt ourselves. And I have been very adaptive to others. And but that's kind of an extreme. It's like either over adapting or not adapting, or rebelling against that adaptation. And I wanted to point out also, I wanted to highlight Mars, which is here transiting Mars, because it's the ruler of Uranus, and it's right on the south node in my 4th house, very representative of my father dying. And then also here above is, you can't leave out the north node and the sun right in my 10th house. And interestingly enough, the sun is transiting the south node of my marriage chart. So my marriage chart, when I got married, the south node was on the 29th degree of Cancer. And so that's interesting. But I wanted to talk about the hexagrams. So Mars is retrograde, and it's exactly conjunct the south node, like I said, and it's on the hexagram 21 in line 6, and the 21 is the hunter, and it's biting through something. It's control. But line 6 is about chaos, and so withdrawal and reliance on inner order in a chaotic situation. There was a lot of chaos going on, and I was drinking to handle and manage it all. So there was part of me that was just really trying to create some order. I grew up in a big family. It was very chaotic, and that memory is something that lives inside, and of course manifests outside in my life. So there's always this swinging back and forth between chaos and order, between Pisces and Virgo, trying to get control of my outer environment, really. But it's really, you can't get control of your outer environment unless you get control of your inner environment. And then the north node is on hexagram, in hexagram 48, and it's in line 6. It's about the depth of self-fulfillment and finding self-fulfillment. And the sun, again, is on that south node of my marriage chart, and it's in hexagram 57, line 6. And it's called utilization, and it's described as the acceptance that clarity is a double-edged sword. There are situations where understanding cannot lead to rectification. There's a lot of grief about letting go that comes up, and you can't change the past. It's past, and what you've done in the past, you can't always rectify. It can be transmuted, but sometimes you have to let go. And then, Venus is up here, And if you remember, Jupiter was in the same spot opposite my Venus when I was having my Neptune square. And Neptune is it's in retrograde, right on my Venus as well. And, that's still in square formation. And what happened during this time, I just want to read the hexagram really quickly before I go into that. But where, transiting Jupiter it's in hexagram 29 in gate line 5. It's overreach or biting off more than one can chew. And my natal Venus, and also where Neptune is in hexagram 30, line 2, feelings which demand energy. They are demanding the opportunity to release the feelings. And if they can't, they build up a lot of tension. And that's definitely true about Venus in my chart. I build it up, and there's a lot of tension in the air until I release it. And Neptune transiting there, was bringing me into states of illusionary, just a lot of illusions that happened during this time about trying to get out of the situation that I was in, going into, different spiritual groups and attaching myself to the leaders of those groups or to teachers and trying to find a way out. And so in a way, it's a blessing, because I needed to go to these places. And it was a gateway to go there. But at the same time, it brings you into a lot of illusionary ideas about things. And then you have to sober up and see the reality. And then you go through your own, your own experiences with that can close you off if you don't allow yourself to remain open and to learn and to understand what these processes are trying to teach you and why you're going through them. And that's why I really appreciate astrology, especially about looking back. It helps me process and understand. I might come to these understandings in a different way, of course, but the symbols and the ways that I'm able to go back and record these videos have been very healing for me, because you think you understand them until you teach others. And I remember there's the Book of Miracles. What is that called? I'm forgetting the name, but they say that you teach what you most need to learn. And that's true. Teachers, they don't know everything. Their students teach them a lot. And I have certainly brought my own lessons to teachers. And I know that they've learned a lot from me as I've learned from them as we go through experiences together. And sometimes those can be quite hard. And I'm sure, I know that what I experience in my rebellion with teachers, I get that back. I know from my family and my teacher relationships when I became a manager. It's just so different. And you're just like, oh, this is what this is what the teacher had to experience. It's a gift, actually, to go through those experiences, because then you're brought to a new understanding and a new level of those experiences. So I think I'm quit recording, maybe. No, I'm still here, thank God. Good. Sometimes this recording stops on me. But anyway, I hope that this was helpful to you and what you're going through in your own experience. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any comments or shares, I'd love to connect with you either in the comments section or, you can contact me through my website. And I also have a Facebook, Suzanne Zen, that I talk about astrology obsessively on, and my own experiences through my own lens and through what I'm learning. And I love to commune with others. I really do. It really helps my own process. And I love people, So great. I hope that you sign up to my newsletter. And if not, if you like this video, give it a like. It helps the algorithm, as you know. Subscribe. I'll be doing the Saturn opposition next, and the Jupiter return, and then finally the Chiron return. And I'll be deeper into that process. It goes through a year, like she said, there's the direct hit, and then you get the retrograde, and then you get the direct hit again. So most of these transits, sometimes they're just one hit wonders, like my Saturn opposition, but most of the time they're 3 hits for a very long year process of processing what you're supposed to process. And even then, after years, you don't really, you're able to kind of take a step back and learn from them in a more objectified way, like Uranus is objectifying, and we're trying to see things from the macro perspective. We get caught in our tiny little experiences, but we're all one, and we all experience these things together. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.